Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for listening, tuning into this opportunity to just have a reflection of your mind, of your literally mind in conversion, your mind that is absolutely willing to see everything in a new light and differently. And that means to align it with Christ's mind, to align it with the truth of yourself. And so this is the reason I'm here. And of course, I've dedicated my entire life to that. And so I have all the reason to have a deep feeling of gratitude for what has been given me, as it is also expressed in the lesson of the day. And this is just one of the lessons in which Jesus, in A Course in Miracles, teaches us that necessity of gratitude and finding that that connection to the gift within our opening, let's say, opening of our consciousness, of simply noticing that the confusion is gone. And so we are also in that original version, in the original edition, as Jesus gave that message of A Course in Miracles, unedited, to Helen Schuckman, which I'm reading, and we can always bring in the quotes where we are. We left it and did the entire first section of chapter 4 in the edited version of the Foundations of our Inner Peace. And if we are using the Complete and Annotated Edition of Robert Barry, then you will find in chapter 4 that we are starting with section 3, that is called The Making of the Ego. And so in that connection where he talks in the beginning there about abstractions and confusions, and of course part of that mind that is indeed in the alignment with God's mind, completely abstract. God is an abstract, and yet we experience him, or that grace, that presence, that power within the framework of our own making. So it is all about using that gratitude that has been given us to train our mind, to change our mind, because through that change of mind, I have arrived at let's say, a capacity. We are sharing that capacity of mind, of seeing things exactly as they are. So there is no need in that understanding to go into confusion and stay in the confusion and have the trillions of questions and then what is right, and there are thousands of possibilities. But it is really then the recognition in God's mind, everything is possible. And I'm really grateful for the simple nature of opening of the mind, because that's the reconnection, that's the communication with his mind. So welcome to that, welcome in that review where we just find ourselves of lesson 217, and we repeat those sentences also throughout the day and for those 20 days. And he even says you should repeat it every day. I'm not a body, I'm free. To remember that this is our premise, this is our remembrance that paves the way out of this misunderstanding of perception and what perception has offered us. And the reason why you're not a body and you're free is because you are, I am, we all are as God created us. This is one self remembering, one mind remembering, in a complete letting go of the meaning that has been given to everything. And he puts in this little review, those two sentences, just two questions, which are very interesting, basically put in between those premises, I'm not a body, I'm free, for I'm still as God created me, and reviewing the lesson. It can be but my gratitude I earn. It can not be anything else. That's what it means, right? It can only be my gratitude that I earn, that I discover, I rediscover, I offer, I share. And here are the questions that he puts there. Who should give thanks for my salvation but myself? Already that question is kind of stretching the mind, because it collapses literally that self-concept that still talks about in plural and sees others, and yeah, we are together in the transformation, and somebody is a little bit more ahead, the other one is more behind, and those who had a revelatory experience just have a big smile on their face, because they're for thank you, thank you for that discovery that there is only one mind and one mind awakening, and that one mind awakening shares itself to itself, and that it appears in different manifestations and pictures, and whatever forms that can lead or are guided by the ego to confusions. Never mind, just let's go ahead and remember what are the ideas in order to convert, to transform these thoughts of denial. And I find always myself back into, let's say, the holiness lessons start with lesson 35. So I start myself into the first 34 lessons, because in those first 34 lessons, this is the basis for an admission, an acknowledgement. Yes, here are all my thoughts of denial of the truth, and I'm willing to see that differently. I'm willing to go into a new seeing that allows me to declare that what I see as a human being with my eyes isn't even there to be seen. It's really just the word that Jesus uses. I love it, is hallucinating. It's just hallucinated and a projected hallucination, nothing else. And therefore, it's over and over in the beginning, trained and indicated to acknowledge its meaninglessness, literally its nothingness on the level of thought. And so there is nobody else there who could thank for my salvation except I myself. All I see is just my mind. All I meet is just myself. And therefore, I see a reflection of my own mind. And if I see anything of limitation that needs correction, that needs salvation, anything that comes and goes, imagine that. That includes even us meeting in a joyful mode, in an expression of how we teach the truth, what expression of the truth comes out. I am the light of the world, and I am as God created me. Even that is part of the undoing process of that salvation, of that plan of salvation that God has given to his son, to you, to me, and therefore will have an end. All those thoughts will have an end. So the question is just always, and that's what we share in our coming together. Well, what are we doing as long as we see such images that are already recognized in their meaninglessness? Where we teach, we do demonstrate the truth. We do give each other a perspective towards that portal that is a vertical alignment to reconnect with the entirety of the light frequency of creative mind. And that is my acknowledgement. Okay, Christ is resurrected, and he is resurrected in me. And indeed, at the very end, if there is just one self, it is that one mind, your own mind, my own mind, that resurrected 2000 years ago, or even more than 2000 years ago, and resurrects right now. It is the recognition of the one self as myself that is where this thank for my salvation can come through in that responsibility. Yes, it has to be myself. There is nobody else there who would need to give thanks for my salvation except but myself. And the second question is, and how but through salvation can I find the self capital, that one self we are talking about right now? How but through salvation can I find the self to whom my thanks are due? How but through salvation? And of course, at that point, the mind becomes very quiet and enters into that frequency of peace and love and light. And there we have the answer to that, where this first may be seen as being found by God Himself before it integrates into that recognition of, yes, that is what I am. I am that I am, that one self. And so it is all, that is what salvation is, that experience of recognizing there is everything that has been held in a meaning, in a limitation in the mind, is being corrected towards the truth right this very moment. Salvation is still the same as healing, as forgiveness. There is no salvation going on in your oneness of God's mind, of what heaven stands for. Salvation is an idea and action of that totality of conversion. In as long as there are images that are representing a fleeting reality, a reality like this, like that, like stronger, like weaker, like now I lost it, now I got it, for this condition of mind, salvation is very, very important. But the mind that enters into the certainty of Christ mind will represent and demonstrate salvation in that ongoing momentary acceptance of the atonement for himself, because that is literally the entering into knowledge itself. And the moment knowledge opens up in the mind, reveals, because it's always there, everything becomes everything disappears in that. So reality becomes, or is seen then and recognized as a complete abstraction. Therefore, God is abstraction, is a representation of the knowledge. He will talk about that in that next chapter that we open up in the textbook. But to have it in plural, abstractions versus confusions, well, that just demonstrates that it is a moment by moment choice also that I make in my own mind. I choose if I want to stay in the confusion of the doubt, literally what my reality is, what the truth is of what I experience this very moment, or I choose to let it be and let it become a complete abstraction. Yeah, so I'm not a body, I'm free. I am still as God created me. Well, we could, of course, go on with that, because the lesson that is lesson 197, it can be, but my gratitude I earn is, of course, also a core lesson in this last 20 lessons, which we just review. And of course, we will, the lesson itself, it stretches the mind into that necessity to learn to let forgiveness take away the sins that you think you see outside yourself. And that is really what salvation, in another definition, is. And you can never think the gifts of God are lent but for a little while before He snatches them away again in death. That is the thought system that we are here to convert. Every idea, even esoteric spiritual ideas, are still in the basics of the ego mind set within the death ideas. And, it's then, okay, I'm going to teach whatever, including this Course in Miracles, until I die. So you see how ridiculous such an expression is? Of course, that needs salvation. That needs the correction. And that is what the ego will always bolster, yes, you got, okay, I cannot, you're already believing in that, you're certain in that you received the gifts of God, but the ego will make you think that this is just given, just lent for a little while, and then you're going to lose it again and you will end up in death. And so you see, what heals that part of the mind, what corrects that, can only be that direct contact within the light of the Holy Spirit. This is where we are joined in right now. This is the mind with Jesus himself right this very moment. This is our oneness or unification constantly as seeming different minds and remembering, wow, we are actually united all the time. We are one mind. It's really incredibly impressive, and thank you, thank you. So it is the end of this belief of fear, and that all these limited ideas as presented by the ego are forever let go and seen that they are over and gone, and they can no longer hold you in imprisonment of your mind. And then, of course, there comes the remembrance of who we are in the heart of God that he talks about in that lesson also, that we do then realize and come to the experience, okay, I am himself, that's what he says, you are himself. And then all gratitude belongs to you because of what you are. Because the moment you recognize that you are not this, what you made yourself of, as just the characteristics of some personality whims in the conceptual mind, but you are literally co-creator with him when you extend your mind, your true creative, that what you are, creative thought. That's an extension, not towards an object, but into infinity, right? That is literally the light shining into the light. So there is no object, no others who need a teaching, no others who would need to hear me. That's all gone. It's really just extension, pure extension, extending unlimited, and as I said, infinitely. It's what eternity is, that is no longer on the timeline. It has nothing to do with time. And this is our experience we are sharing right now. This is the stillness of mind that communicates perfectly, in complete perfection. This is what is called to remember who I am, to remember what and who God created as myself. And if you allow yourself to feel into it, you see that what comes forth is pure gratitude. It is literally the singing and laughing heart within the heart. Right there, we begin to talk of communication. Right there. Thank you. So the last sentences that we shared in the last episode was that expression and remembrance that I need, where Jesus says, I need devoted teachers who share my aim of healing the mind. Will you be, are you, his devoted teacher? You give that yes to yourself because you give it, when you give it to him, you give it to the universe. And he finished that section, that first section in the edited chapter 4, that spirit is far beyond the soul, is far beyond the need of your protection or mine. But remember this, in this world, you need not have tribulation because I have overcome the world. Those are Jesus' words. It's a confirmation. It's a certainty, an assurance that he gives you that he has overcome the world. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you remember that you have overcome the world and you're overcoming it right now in that experience? And that is the reason. That is why you should be of good cheer. You should be of good cheer. And from there, he goes into the section then that is in the edited version, then called the ego and false autonomy, second section. It is reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. In fact, it is the best question you could ask. Because by that experience, you discover its impossibility. And it's only possible in dreaming that you can imagine that you have made the ego, or what you were making of the ego. As the title in the CAE, in the Complete and Annotated Edition, starting with section 3, gives it the title, The Making of the Ego. But before we enter here, because both versions have start with the same, and there were like two paragraphs, which of one paragraph is kind of the second one very important because it starts talking about that. The term is perceptual distortions. That's what we were talking about, where the mind distorts perception by giving it a meaning that indeed it could never have. And so in none of those editions you find that text, but you find it in the original version that has Helen received in the notes. And of course, most of that things Jesus directed to kind of personally and talked personally in this section, mostly to Bill and of course also to Helen at some points. But he says here, and it is a little bit connected with what their job was, because they were at Columbia University in the psychology department, as far as I remember it. And he continued then saying that Bill's course was very carefully chosen, because then here is a term that they were dealing with abnormal psychology is ego psychology, he calls it. And this is precisely the kind of content which should never be taught from the ego, whose abnormality should be lessened by teaching, not increased. And that's a very important point to remember. The Holy Spirit, as the teacher, the one teacher, will never increase pain, will never increase confusion, will never increase abnormality. You, Bill, are particularly well suited to perceive this difference and can therefore teach this course as it should be taught. Most teachers have an unfortunate tendency to teach the course abnormally. Interesting, that he actually makes that differentiation and points it out. And though we say always, well, everything that points to the truth or makes directs towards some progress is valuable, and indeed it is. And yet there is nothing wrong with it also to see if there's a real alignment in given with the Holy Spirit or an abnormality. Many of the students are apt to suffer considerable perceptual distortion because of their own authority problem. Your teaching assignment, and I assure you it is an assignment, he puts in quotes then, your teaching assignment will be to present perceptual distortions. Everything that has been given a meaning that is not the meaning that God has given it, which is one meaning, which is always the meaning of his own mind, his thought. So it's not about definition and not about a saying of what the truth is, but it is about a knowing the truth. So will be to present perceptual distortions without either engaging in them yourself or encouraging your students to do so. So this is kind of where I didn't find it in any of the edited versions, but I think it is a very valuable expression that he gives here in this original notes. The teaching assignment is to present perceptual distortions without either engaging in them myself or encouraging students, the learners, to do so. Yeah. It would say that there's still a way of seeing a perception, and that is kind of held real or valuable to proceed. We have seen that. We have seen that during the COVID time, how many teachers would teach actually. We see it on the political stage all the time, where there's a presentation which is just part of the perception of separation thought, of fear, and it is given meaning, or it is kind of indicated that's closer to the truth, or that's the truth, and let's believe this. So no, he says our assignment is to neither engage in them ourselves nor encourage our brothers to do so. This interpretation of your role and theirs is too charitable to induce fear. If you adhere to this role, you will both engender and experience hope. See, hope, that is really what is engendered. Let's see where it goes with that. Will both engender and experience hope, and you will inspire rather than dispirit. This spirit, the future teachers and therapists I'm entrusting to you. Wow. In other words, he said, hey, look, I'm sending you the guys anyway, that you need. And those are also teachers and therapists and coaches, or however you want to express it, as you are. You're learning all together, and your simple responsibility is to inspire them and not to dispirit. He uses the word. and that is to engender and experience hope. There's but hope as a wishful thinking isn't gonna do it either. No? It is really the hope into, yes, it does work. It might not look like this. It might look like this world goes down the drain very fast as it is perceived. But the hope is, no, there's something waiting behind that perception. And let's hope that this is now opening up miraculously right now. No? So we are about that. We don't even we can offer hope to those who are desperate, but for ourselves it might be more to live it, no? to walk the talk. No? Yeah. And then two more sentences, and then you can find and read it also in the course. I promise to attend myself, and you should at least credit with me with some dependability in keeping my own promises. I never make them lightly because I know the need my brothers have for trust. So he promises that he is going to be part of it. He is going to attend himself in this inspiration journey home, and how we offer it and teach it to ourselves. And now, if you would like to read it with me, you find now in the complete and annotated version, starting in the third section of chapter 4 and the second section in the edited version. And here again, he addresses Bill with that, where you can read in the edited version, you. No? Bill has asked lately how the mind could ever have made the ego. This is a perfectly reasonable question. In fact, the best question either of you could ask. There is no point in giving an historical answer, because the past doesn't matter in human terms, and history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. Okay, because the past doesn't matter in human terms, and history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. You have often Bill has often told you, okay, this is between Bill and Helen, that your thinking is too abstract at times, and he's right. So here is the term of making it abstract so that it would be maybe closer to the truth. You can see it. But abstraction does apply to knowledge, right? So here he makes the difference between, hey, look, as we were sharing it before, God is complete abstraction. But in the tendency to try to make it abstract is actually not to enter into the conversion, So knowledge is completely impersonal, and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. That is the reason why abstraction does apply to knowledge. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. So we are looking here at the specificity, something concrete, or then what the release into knowledge, where a complete abstraction can be known. Knowledge is completely impersonal. Examples are irrelevant to its understanding. There is no example of any perceptual, whatever appearance or storyline needed. Once we think we know, once I know, because knowledge is completely impersonal and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. Perception, however, is always specific, therefore quite concrete. Perceptual distortions are not abstractions. Perceptual distortions, we were just talking that above, that your teaching assignment is to present perceptual distortions without either engaging, in them yourself or encouraging your fellow travelers to do so. He goes here back. Perceptual distortions are not abstractions. They are merely confusions. So that is also my title in that sense, like we are looking abstractions versus confusions. Perceptual distortions are not abstractions, they are confusions. Each man makes one ego for himself. What a sentence, it's a very popular sentence that can be remembered throughout this course. Each man makes one ego for himself, although it is subject to enormous variation because of its instability, and he makes one for everyone he perceives. So an ego, to make an ego for oneself and to make one for everyone who is perceived, which is equally variable. Their interaction is a process which literally alters both, because they were not made either by or with the unalterable. It is particularly important to realize that this alteration can and does occur as readily when the interaction takes place in the mind as when it involves physical presence. Thinking about another ego, is as ineffective in changing relative perception as is their physical interaction. Thinking about another ego is as effective in changing relative perception as is physical interaction. There could be no better example of the fact that the ego is an idea, though not a reality-based thought. As I said, a hallucination, right? It's not reality-based. It's just an idea in the mind. It's just a made-up idea. Your own present state is the best concrete example Bill could have of how the mind could have made the ego. You do have real knowledge at times, but when you throw it away, it is as if you never had it. This willingness is so apparent that Bill need only perceive it to see that it does happen. If it can occur that way in the present, why should he be surprised that it occurred that way in the past? All psychology rests on the principle of continuity of behavior. Surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, but hardly to someone that has occurred with such persistence. An extreme example is a good teaching aid. That is also, we do use that. We do use extreme examples as teaching aids. Not because it is typical, but because it is clear. The more complex the material, the clearer the example should be for teaching purposes. So here Jesus gives us this help in how to teach, in what way to teach. And he put then into parentheses and talks to Bill himself. Bill, remember that for your own course, and do not avoid the dramatic. It holds the student's interest precisely because it is so apparent that it can be readily perceived. The more complex the material, the clearer the example should be for teaching purposes. But as we have said before, all teaching devices in the hands of good teachers are aimed at rendering themselves unnecessary. We had that in the previous joinings episodes, where I think it was even in the last class, where he would say that eventually the teacher releases the learner, the student, and this is absolutely necessary. If this is not done, of course, it becomes to a kind of a cult, to a kind of a personal attachment to the teacher. And that's already a clear sign that there's an idolization going on and needs correction. So this is all part of the experiencing in the transformation. Everyone has an experience of release of this limited idea who found himself there. And I speak for myself, and I had many, many opportunities with many, many masters, especially of the East, where I could see that where I would hold myself, or where finally the miracle would open that up and show me that it is the recognition of oneness in the revelatory experience of the one self, where the release of it, where the liberation occurs. Otherwise, it's still judged uh, as the perceptual image, of what the teacher is in the manifestation of a body and of personality traits. So we are already beyond that. So in every opportunity and occasion, this is needed to remember that it is about rendering themselves unnecessary, as these teaching devices are in the hands of a good teacher aimed at rendering them unnecessary. I would therefore like to use your present state as an example of how the mind can work, provided you both fully recognize that it need not work that way. I never forget this myself, and a good teacher shares his own ideas which he himself believes. I repeat that last sentence once again. I never forget this myself, and a good teacher shares his own ideas, which he himself believes. Otherwise, he cannot really, under quotes, profess, as we had it in the previous class, which is an expression that was used in the Bible. No? He cannot really profess them as we used the term before. No? So that is really an owning it for myself. With full recognition of its transitory nature, again into parentheses, recognition which I hope you both share, now directs it or talks about Helen offers a very good teaching example of alternations between soul and ego, with concomitant variation between peace and frenzy. In answers to Bill's question, it is perfectly apparent that when she is ego dominated, when it basically reviews and uses that as an example, because of course there was a lot of resistance of Helen in that communication with Jesus and receiving the message. But at the end, he just said, well, you will do it, because she wanted to get rid of him. And, why are you choosing me? Somebody else would be better to do that. No, you will do it, was his answer. No? So when she is ego dominated, she does not know her soul capitalized, of course, as the one self. Her abstract ability, which is perfectly genuine and does stem from knowledge, cannot help her because she has turned to the concrete, which she cannot handle abstractly. Being incapable of appropriate concreteness perceptually, because her ego is not her natural home, she suffers. Of course, she suffers from its intrusions, but not from complete lack of knowledge. The result is a kind of, unquote, double vision. That's the result, which would have produced an actual diplopia if she had not settled for nearsightedness. So I goes here into a kind of eye diagnosis. If she wouldn't have settled into nearsightedness, it would have ended up in an actual diplopia. This was an attempt to see the concrete more clearly through the ego's eyes, without the interference of the longer range. Her virtual lack of astigmatism, that's what, I mean, Helen, she has big glasses no, before her eyes, um, of astigmatism is due to her real efforts at objectivity and fairness. See, there's all a reason how the mind operates. If there's a nearsightedness, a farsightedness, astigmatismus, diplopia, whatever effect or whatever condition of the eye, due to her real efforts at objectivity and fairness. She has not attained them, or she would not be nearsighted, but she has tried to be fair with what she permitted herself to see. Why are you surprised that something happened in the dim past when it is so clearly happening right now? Okay, now it continues with paragraph 4, I think that it is. You forget the love that even animals have for their own offspring and the need they feel to protect them. The love that even animals have for their offsprings. Yeah, this is because they regard them as part of themselves. No one disowns something he regards as a very real part of himself. And of course, the mother feelings after birth, the defense of father and mother of the kids when they grow up, because there's this sense of being very much so part of themselves. Man reacts to this ego much as God does to his souls, with love, protection, and great charity. The reaction of man to the self he made is not at all surprising. In fact, it duplicates in many ways the way he will one day react to his real creations, which are as timeless as he is. Beautifully expressed, isn't it? The question is not how man responds toward his ego, but only what he believes he is. Again, belief is an ego function, and as long as your origin is open to belief at all, you're regarding it from an ego viewpoint. That is why the Bible quotes me as saying, ye believe in God, believe also in me. I think that's in John 14, right? Ye believe in God, believe also in me. Belief does apply to me because I am the teacher of the ego. When teaching is no longer necessary, you will merely know God. Merely know God. Belief that there is another way is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. This is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self. Helen always had this idea, but it merely confused her. Bill, you were more capable of a long-range view, and that is why your eyesight is good. So if your eyesight is good, you can tell yourself that you're capable of a long-range view. But you were willing to see because you utilized judgment against what you saw. This gave you clearer perception than Helen's, but cut off the cognition level more deeply. That is why you believe that you never had knowledge. Repression has been a stronger mechanism in your own ego defense, and that is why you find her shift so hard to tolerate. Willfulness is more characteristic of her, and that is why she has less sense than you do. It is extremely fortunately temporarily that the particular strengths you will both develop and use are precisely those which the other must supply now. You who will be the strengths of God are quite weak, and you who will be God's help are clearly in need of help. What better plan could have been devised to prevent the intrusion of the ego's arrogance on the outcome? I do understand that this was be edited out, in the presentation of A Course in Miracles to the world. But as I'm doing it right now, in the integration of that personal contact of Helen's mind with Jesus, and Bill being part of, or even the initiator of that entire um, joining and journey, is gives a very good example how a human being um, proceeds in its own transformation towards the truth, towards its entire undoing. So it still teaches and shows certain all those stages within the personal transformation that at that point in that original version, that Jesus' mind pointed it out to Helen, and in that sense, it was a personal guidance, Of course, isn't it great that it can be transferred towards the world and into the world's everyone's own mind? But those sections indicate clearly that there is a personal communication going on between Jesus and Helen. Like the master teacher would always say, I'm not interested in the word at all. I'm only interested in you. I'm only talking to you. I'm only teaching to myself as you. So this is a good example of that. So let's finish that up for today. Undermining the foundation of an ego thought system must be perceived as painful, even though this is anything but true. Babies scream in rage if you take away a knife or a scissors, even though they may well harm themselves if you do not. The speed up has placed you both in the same position. Yeah, I don't know if that was kept in that position. I made myself here a note of first section, fifth paragraph in chapter 4, so doesn't matter. Here in the original notes, we have it right here. The speed up has placed you both in the same position. You are not by any means prepared, and in this sense, you are babies. Everybody who starts here, no matter where they come from, if that opens up that connection with Jesus, his mind, you better consider yourself you're a baby, and now you are guided and accompanied to grow up by him. You have no sense of real self-preservation and are very likely to decide that you need precisely what would hurt you most, the scissors. Whether you know it now or not. However, you both have willed to cooperate in a concerted and very commendable effort to become both harmless and helpful. That is really what are the gifts that we receive on the way. Two attributes which must go together. Your attitude, even toward this, are necessarily conflicted because all attitudes are ego-based. Last sentence. This will not last. Be patient a while and remember what we have said once before. The outcome is as certain as God. Be of good cheer. Be patient a while. Remember what we have said once before. The outcome is as certain as God. This is a done deal, brother. Or the fix is in, he would also say, like the light is in your mind already. The Holy Spirit is already working, or even has maybe completed his work, and you become a clear expression and extension of him. So I'm stopping here because that is also where this made another section in the complete and annotated version. In the original notes, he continued then talking, but we will continue this if we are here a moment longer, but we go day by day, moment by moment. And I thank you from my heart of accompanying me here. I hope it does inspire you to either read the course or also want to use and have a look at the original version in no matter what edition, or it's all valuable. That gives a little bit an indication of that personal undoing process by his guidance, by his teaching. It's like in the 12-step program, it was used as is used as the expression of the sponsoring. It's really the guide that holds the light and directs the ego mind towards its complete forgiveness and healing. So we are one mind in that, isn't it, brother? Thank you so much for being here, and I'm just gonna finish up here with a few more sounds. You have a most wonderful day. Yeah?